On today's show, the Hawks defensively fell apart on this Thursday evening, and the end result was a 9-point loss in San Antonio. We'll talk about what it means, what the takeaways were from this game, and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2108 of the Locked On Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the night here on a Thursday evening into Friday. And today's pod will be focused on what became a 135-126 loss on the road for the Hawks in San Antonio on this Thursday. A lot to get to from this one, from the situation that was coming up before the game started to what wrong during this game, what right during this game, and a lot of nuance along the way, but certainly not the Thursday that everyone was hoping for around Atlanta after the spotless West Coast trip. Last week, 4-0, they come home and lose a competitive, respectable game to the Pistons at home on Tuesday. And this one, in the eyes of many people that I heard from over the last few days, was quote-unquote going to be an easy win for the Hawks. And I'm not saying that around the team, by the way. This is the fan base, and I get why. The headline of the injury spectrum in this game was that, yes, Trae Young is out for the Hawks, but Wembanyama and Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper were all out for San Antonio. And when I was talking about that on social media, a lot of the responses I was getting was, it's going to be a breezy win for the Hawks, et cetera, et cetera. And I tried to warn people. I really did. Not that I thought the Hawks were going to lose this game, because I thought they had a pretty decent chance to win this one, but this is one of those really kind of terrible schedule spots for Atlanta, and I can already see the comments now about how I'm giving the Hawks excuses. And no, I'm going to talk about how poorly the Hawks played in this game, and they did play very poorly. I want to be very clear about that. I will also say this. The Hawks have now traveled after 6 consecutive games. They had the very long West Coast trip. They came home for exactly one game, turned around, and went back to the west side of the country in San Antonio. And the Spurs have been home for 10 consecutive days. And I think they played like 7 of the last 8 at home. This is one of these NBA schedule spots that, yes, I know it wasn't a back-to-back, so it didn't really get the attention, but I wrote about it on Patreon. This is not backwards-looking analysis. I wrote about that this morning on my Patreon at patreon.com/BTRowland, just saying, hey, guys, look out for this one. It's kind of a bad spot for the Hawks. And in the end, it was a not disastrous performance overall. Losing this game by 9 points is not like offensive by nature, but the defense was actually offensive in this game for the Hawks a lot of the way. So I gave that context at the beginning because I wanted to say, yes, Wemby's out, Castle's out. This game was literally a pick'em at FanDuel, our sponsors, before this game began. If you don't know what that means an actual coin flip in the betting market, according to our friends at FanDuel. Neither team favored, literally a point spread of 0. The definition of a coin flip game. So, yes, you want to win those, obviously. And I thought the Hawks did not play well enough to win in this game, to be honest with you. But it was not some performance I saw it being discussed in this game that the Hawks definitely should have won. No, it was a coin flip game. That's what happens. If you're new to the podcast, I like to give the whole picture, for better or worse. There'll be some shows I'm sure that would come on and yell and scream, and I'm not going to do that. I'll express my frustration with the Hawks defense, as it was very poor in this game, but not my brand. And I'll tell you what I think with my brain, with the numbers, etc. That is the kind of overarching theme of this podcast, generally speaking. But the Hawks led this game early. Actually, it feels like a long time ago now. They had the lead in the first quarter. Then they allowed a huge run to begin the second quarter. It got down by as many as 19 points. Then they came back, and I will say, to at least somewhat credit the Hawks, this has been a resilient bunch. This happened as well on Tuesday in the loss to Detroit. They always keep coming back, which is a good positive sign for the future. But they did come back in this game. The Hawks took a lead for exactly 13 seconds of the fourth quarter, and then they allowed a 20-4 run immediately, and the Hawks never recovered from that on the way to what became a 9-point loss. So there's a lot to get to about this game, and the offense was, I would say, it was up and down. We'll talk about that in a second. But simply put, it was a defensive first loss for the Hawks, and it's not even really up for discussion, to be honest with you. Overall, with the current roster the Hawks have, minus Trae Young, their defense is probably the strength of the team. And on paper, that makes total sense. It should be a strength of a team. But if you want to know how bad the Hawks were on defense in this game, Atlanta had, this is only, game 16 of the season. So I get it's not that crazy of a number, but this is their 4th best offensive game of the season by the numbers. And they lost this game by 9 points, which tells you how bad that the defense was. So it was, for me, pretty clearly their worst overall defensive performance of the season. If you want to grade on a curve because of what I've said before about the schedule spot, I will understand that. And yes, there were some bad moments in some defensive games earlier in the year. Obviously, the Toronto game, the season opener, had some, in particular, bad transition moments that were memorable in all the wrong ways. But this is the game in which the Hawks have allowed the worst defensive rating of any game this year. 1.31 points per possession allowed. That is a disaster number, especially when the Spurs were without, again, two of their top 4 or 5 players, in addition to their number 2 overall pick from last year in Dylan Harper. Also in this game, and not a huge surprise when you factor in that they had the worst defensive game of the season. Their worst defensive half of the season was the first half. They had a 145 defensive rating in the first half, and their worst defensive quarter of the season in the second quarter. They had a 170 defensive rating in the second quarter on the way to allowing 46 points. And look, kudos to the Spurs. They played well. They made shots. I saw some people talking about this, and look, I'm not above looking at the variance of what happens here, and it's a make or miss league. Sometimes shots go in, sometimes I don't. This is not one of those games where you can say, well, the Spurs just made everything, and the Hawks didn't. The Hawks actually had better shooting numbers than the Spurs did in this game. Yeah, San Antonio shot the ball really well. They had 17 threes. That's above their normal baseline. I will certainly grant that. But the Hawks shot the ball better than the Spurs and lost by 9. That means you lost everywhere else in this game, essentially. Overall, the Hawks took 12 fewer shooting possessions than the Spurs. What that means is, generally speaking, if you do the other things well, you want to take more shots than your opponent. And that way, if you miss more shots, it levels out a little bit. But the Hawks had 12 fewer shots than the Spurs. That's bad. They lost the turnover battle in this game. They lost the rebounding battle in this game. They lost the free throw battle. Basically, every other area of the game other than 3-point shooting. That was the only stat area that the Hawks were better than the Spurs at in this game. And it almost put the Hawks in a spot where they could actually win this one. Like, when they took the lead in the fourth quarter, I was kind of laughing. Like, the Hawks are playing terribly, and they just can't stop making shots. And they still didn't stop making shots. It just wasn't enough to overcome everything else. So, defensively, just to put a bow on it broadly, we'll come back to the more specifics in a second. It was really, really, really ugly stuff, particularly in the front court for the Hawks. Like, individually, we'll talk about this later on. I thought Jalen Johnson had one of his worst games of the season defensively. Porzingis looks very rusty coming back defensively in particular. It was a mess. Rotations were out of whack. They were a step slow on all kinds of different stuff. They also didn't create turnovers, and this team is not like incredibly reliant, but certainly reliant to some degree on habit creation. That's the way they built their roster, and it didn't really create a lot of turnovers in this game. So all that feeding on each other, it was not positive and kind of hard to watch, honestly, on that end of the floor. Offensively, they had a 123 offensive rating. You were supposed to win when you do that. Now, you won't win every game, to be fair, but you shouldn't lose by 9 when you do that offensively. They had 69% true shooting, a very nice number, obviously, but they hit 20 threes. They were 20 of 37 from 3. That's 54%. That was their second most makes of the season so far from 3 with 20, and their best percentage of the season. If all I knew coming into the game was the Hawks were going to shoot 20 of 37 from 3, I would have told you that the Hawks are going to win this game like 95% of the time. Maybe 90, something like that. It would legitimately be a sky-high number. Like, hey, one thing, just that. The Hawks are huge favorites at that point. But instead, they lost everywhere else. And again, I know I said it before. It's worth emphasizing. They lost everywhere else in this game. Now, they did the ball security was a little bit better than it was in previous games. The Hawks have been on a really ugly run of ball security. They've been winning anyway, but they were quite literally dead last in the NBA in turnover rate in the month of November coming into the night. They probably still are. They were a little bit better in this game with 16 turnovers. That's still too many, and they led directly to 25 points. That's also very bad. They did nothing on the glass offensively. They had 6 offensive rebounds in the entire game. That's not enough, obviously. They got to the line a shockingly low number of times, 13 attempts. I saw some Hawks fans frustrated, and I get it with the officiating. I didn't love some calls. I will say that. That's also not the reason they lost this game. I saw way too much of that after the game. Like, no, they didn't defend well enough. That was the moral of the story. Sure, a call here, a call there. Could have been closer, absolutely. But they weren't aggressive enough getting to the rim. You kind of have to earn free throw attempts, and the Hawks just didn't in this game. So also shot very poorly at the rim. along the way. They got there a decent amount, just didn't make a lot of shots around the rim. So I like to give you the process and then the results and then combine the two, basically. The results on offense were good because they shot the ball so incredibly well. By the way, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who was, his performance will probably be lost to time because they lost this game, had career highs in scoring and threes in this game. 38 points, 8 threes. He was heroic on offense, and it still wasn't enough. But even if you took Nickeil away, the rest of the team was still 12 of 27 from three. That's 44%. It wasn't even just Nickeil. Everyone except for Rugiet basically shot well from three in this game. And it didn't matter because the process stuff was not good enough. If you were to level out the shooting and make it a more like even a really good shooting night, not a crazy elite one like this one was. If the Hawks shot 40% from three in this game, they would have lost by 20. That's not a good sign. Obviously, offensively, they've been worse than this, but if you kind of just level out the shooting a little bit, they were not very good offensively either. Still, that was not the problem in this game, to be fair. But a frustrating night at the office. It's not one where I think people always overstate the loss of one, maybe two players and the impact of that on an opponent. The Spurs are more than capable of winning games. In fact, they're now 3-0 without Wembanyama. That happens in the NBA. It does matter how you play, where you play, all of that. So just losing to the Spurs is not embarrassing in itself. With that said, the defense has got to be better than this. I'm sure they know that. Mike Bray, coming out of halftime, Hawks assistant coach, did the interview with FanDuel Sports Network, and he said that Quinn Snyder read them the riot act basically at halftime. The Hawks were a little bit better defensively after halftime, to be fair, so maybe that worked a little. But they all know how bad they were, I'm sure. And the film that I watched, and the rewatch was just galling. There was some bad moments defensively in this game. But it's one game. They're still in fine shape at 9-7 this season. No reason to panic, but not the best night in the world for the Hawks, especially on defense in San Antonio. All right, more to come in a second after a word from our partners. Let's talk about something that every business owner knows way too well, and that is missed calls. When a customer tries to reach you and they can't possibly get through, that's money slipping through the cracks and slipping away from you. Quo, spelled Quo, is a smarter way to run your business communications and never actually miss an opportunity to connect with a client and potential customer. Quo is the number one business phone system built for 2025 and not for 1995. It's simple, it's modern, and it's designed to help you communicate faster, look more professional, and stay connected wherever you happen to be working. I love that Quo works anywhere for you, right from an app, from your phone, your computer, with no extra devices and no clunky landlines. Your whole team will share one number and collaborate on calls and texts like a shared inbox, which makes customers that much easier to actually help them, which is very much the point of customer service. Plus, their built-in AI is a game changer as well. It logs your calls, writes summaries, and even follows up for you automatically. They make small businesses with Quo feel big, and they also make big businesses feel efficient. And there's no wonder that 90,000 plus businesses are already using Quo. You can try Quo for free right now at quo.com/lockedonnba. That's QUO.com/lockedonnba. And yes, you can actually even keep your existing number if you want to as well. Quo. No missed calls, no missed customers. The NBA is heating up right now. DoorDash has actually found the perfect way to keep you in their bag all season long. Whether you are watching for highlights or watching your fantasy teams or just wanting to watch your favorite players play basketball, DoorDash makes every single game night even better. DoorDash is the official on-demand delivery platform of the NBA, and they are celebrating right now with something called the bag drop. Every time a player in the NBA has 50 points or more in a game, DoorDash drops 50% off your order with Dash Pass the next day, and you're automatically entered for a chance to win the ultimate fan bag. We're talking about player-inspired drip, exclusive gear, and stuff you'll actually want to actually get. With DoorDash, I love this not just food as well. You can get everything that you want delivered, from snacks to meals to drinks to headphones, ice, even socks, all delivered straight to you. And they have you covered for late night highlights, watch parties, double OT fuel ups, and more. So the next time somebody has 50 points or more in the NBA, you can use that promo code NBA50 the next day, 50% off on DoorDash with Dash Pass, plus your shot at the bag drop as well. That's for members only, 50% off, $10 the next day after 51 game with promo code. Terms apply. No purchase necessary. Ends April 13th. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Visit DoorDashInYourBag.com for full details. DoorDash in your bag all season long. Before diving back into the game itself, I want to encourage you to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check out the show anywhere you get your podcasts. Please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And importantly, please tell your friends, your colleagues, your family, etc. about the podcast. I appreciate you being here as always. We'll dive in now to how this game kind of unfolded. Porzingis returned for the Hawks, as did Rugiet. So the Hawks were close to full strength. Obviously, Trey is still out, so that's a big loss. But everybody else of consequence for the Hawks was playing in this game, which is nice. I will say there was some rust for sure for Porzingis and Richer, which is not unexpected, but certainly worth noting. Porzingis did shoot the ball well in this one. He reached 10,000 career points in this game, which is a nice feat for any player to get to. And the Hawks shot the ball well early and often. They hit 3 threes in the first 5 minutes of the game. But defensively, from the very beginning, they were allowing way, way too many good looks to the Spurs. That's all over my notes throughout this game. They also allowed 12 three-point attempts in the first 9 minutes for the Spurs. Like, they were just getting into whatever they wanted offensively way too easily. And I would say neither team defended well for the most part, and that started at the very beginning of the contest. Rotationally, it was Okongwu as the first sub for Porzingis pretty early. Okongwu actually ended up playing almost as much as Porzingis in this game. I got questions about why they wouldn't start Okongwu. That's a whole rabbit hole that I won't go down today. But it is worth noting, I just will say this. I'm not defending this, it's just what it is. Porzingis has started every game that he has played in since 2016-17. He has come off the bench one time in his entire career, and it was in his second season. So that's probably part of why that he would be starting still, even though Okongwu's been really good. I personally do not get bothered as much as everybody else seems to about starting lineups, but I get why there's a question about it, but it seems to me it's fully cemented, and maybe that'll change later on, but it's Porzingis as a starter for now. Elsewhere, Kennard and Krejci came in the game around the 5-minute mark. Then it was Mo Gay and Keaton Wallace came in later together in the first quarter. After not doing it at all on Tuesday, the Hawks used my favorite lineup multiple times tonight, which is the Keaton Wallace, Luke Kennard, beat Krejci trio. That lineup does not work. It did work better in the second half of this game because they made all the threes, which is not sustainable as far as building a lineup is concerned. Just want to at least note that. Come back to it later on. There was a scary moment at the end of the first quarter where Mo Gay and Okongwu went down in a heap after a Luke Kornet collision. Everyone seemed to be okay. Mo Gay did come back in the game, but Mo Gay played 4 minutes. That's crazy low. The only thing I can think of is that maybe he got thrown off rotationally by having that little hiccup with his health. But I didn't like that. And I think defensively, the Hawks having Mo Gay available and not playing him on a night where they couldn't get a stop is not the best thing in the world. Anyway, the Hawks were up by 6 points, and then in the first quarter, they shot the ball really well, as they were the entire game, and then the game flipped towards San Antonio with a 26-7 run by the Spurs to begin the second quarter. That changed that lead into a double-digit deficit in a hurry, and most of that came, in fact, I think it was 19-5 against that lineup that I mentioned before with Wallace, Kennard, and Krejci. Along with, by the way, they played those three guys with the two centers, Okongwu and Porzingis. That means no Daniels, no Nickeil, and no Jalen at the same time, and the Spurs had De'Aaron Fox on the court. I do not understand that. I promise I won't do the whole thing again, but if you've been listening to the show the last couple of weeks, this lineup does not make sense to me at all. And obviously, I know you can't play a perfect lineup every time. I promise. It's a 48-minute game. You got to use certain guys, certain places, but having none of Dyson, Nickeil, or Jalen on the court doesn't make sense to me, and even more so with Fox on for the Spurs, who was clearly their number one option in this game, given that they didn't have Castle, Wemby, etc., and that theory of the case just did not work whatsoever. They scored 26 points in 5.5 minutes, which is obviously brutal. The Spurs were cooking offensively, and the Hawks were down by as many as 19. Some big shots, I would say, from Nickeil in particular throughout the game to kind of get the Hawks kind of more in touch. But then every time they make a shot, they couldn't follow it up with a stop. So they were down by 14 at halftime after they scored 7 points in the final minute and a half. But the numbers in the second quarter were comical. I said it before, but they had a 170 defensive rating in the quarter. They allowed 7 threes. They allowed 12 free throw attempts. They allowed 11 assists. It was gross. And yeah, San Antonio was hot in the second quarter. It's impossible for one team to be wholly responsible for that kind of outburst in the NBA. These are all professionals. But yes, they were hot, but the Hawks defense was terrible on paper as well. It wasn't just shot making. It was bad. In the third, the Hawks did play better. So they got it down to 9 by the middle of the quarter. Alexander-Walker, who was just crazy good in this game, was on fire. He had 11 points in the first 5 minutes of the second half. He had 24 points at that point in time. And the Hawks had one more run in them late in the third, a 14-4 run to tie the game. The Spurs were kind of ice cold. For the only time in the whole game, they actually went cold. They missed 8 out of 9 threes at one point. Defensively, the Hawks weren't that much better, honestly, but the Spurs just stopped making shots, which does help sometimes. At the same time as that, the Hawks were 7 of their first 9 from 3 in the third quarter, and that kind of congruence allowed the Hawks to get back into the game and tie the game in the third. The 3-guard lineup, by the way, I mentioned before, it actually did work this time because they made all the threes. It was good to see Keaton Wallace make a couple shots. Luke made a couple shots as well. The Hawks just shot the ball incredibly well, but the theory doesn't still work, but alas. Anyway, fast forward a little bit. The Hawks took the lead briefly, and I do mean briefly. So Nickeil scored with about 9 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and that gave the Hawks a 1-point lead and their first lead since it was 39-38 in the second quarter. Unfortunately, that was their one and only lead in the second half, and it lasted for 13 seconds because the Spurs scored the next possession, and they scored the next 10 points in 4 possessions. So that's kind of, for me, that encapsulates this game. The Hawks finally made a bunch of shots. They got right all the way back into it. Nickeil was playing fantastic, and then they allowed 10 points on 4 trips. And if you watch it, they weren't fake. Like, it was just bad defense, bad process, making mistakes, not closing out fast enough, being a step slow, etc. And after a timeout, Nickeil did score again to kind of stop the run a little bit. And he had so many of those pivotal shots in this game. I mean, if they didn't have Alexander-Walker, they would have lost this game by many points, I would say. But that 10-0 run became a 20-4 push by the Spurs to go up by 15 with 5 minutes left. And that doesn't mean the game is over, but the Hawks just didn't have a run in them at that point. Like, they had already made a couple of runs to get back in the game. It was 15. They got it down in the final 5 minutes to, I know it was 9 at the very end. It was never, the Hawks scored with 35 seconds to go to make it 9. It was not really competitive in that last 5 minutes. So the damage was kind of done. Overall, they just didn't have one more gear and enough stops. They only had one stretch in the whole game where they played well defensively. Or I should even say played well, had good results defensively. And it was in that third quarter when the Spurs kind of leveled off with 21 points. Then they allowed 40 in the fourth, and not in a fluky way. So I already gave you all the numbers. It was as bad as the eye test. The eye test was bad. The stats were bad. It was everyone come together and be bad defensively. And we'll talk about the individual stuff in a second. But it was not everybody was bad defensively, but most guys were not their best. And that resulted in a pretty ugly performance on the whole. All right, in a second, I'll be diving into my player-by-player evaluations, including a quick look ahead to what's to come this weekend. It's a busy weekend for the Hawks, and we'll get to all that and more in just one moment. This show is brought to you by PrizePicks. You don't make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can actually get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, the NBA, both other sports as well. There's no better time to jump in right now on the action than with PrizePicks. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is actually the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats. If you get them right, you win. It takes less than 1 minute to make a lineup, and you can actually play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I've been using PrizePicks for a long time now. Football, basketball, baseball, etc. Keeps every game more exciting, and they got a lot of different offerings for all the sports that you like as well. They have this new stacks feature. That's a game changer. You actually pick more on different players, points, threes, and assists in the same lineup if you want to. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. And that's huge at PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app right now today and use code LOCKEDONNBA. Get $50 in lineups if you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. That is code LOCKEDONNBA, $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup at PrizePicks. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Have your health or family needs changed lately? Georgia's got you covered. Georgia Access is our state's marketplace for Georgians to compare, apply, and enroll in health insurance plans that offer the best value for their individual needs. Open enrollment is happening now. Visit georgiaaccess.gov today. That's georgiaaccess.gov. Georgia Access, health insurance for Georgia by Georgia. I will dive in now to the player-by-player evaluations from this game. 10 guys appeared for Atlanta out of the 12 who were active on this trip. The Hawks have a bunch of guys in the G League. And Foy Dante is still hurt. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is still hurt, for example. But they did have 12 guys active in this game. Moge played 4 minutes. Now, I alluded to that earlier. Maybe it was because of the fall he took and the injury. Hopefully that's the case. If that's not the reason, I don't really get it. I understand that Porzingis is back now, and Mo's going to play less as a result. No matter what you think about that, there is a numbers game in the front court when you have Porzingis, Okongwu, and Jalen ahead of Mo. I get that. 4 minutes is not enough, especially when your defense is struggling, and Mo is the best defender of the 4 front court players. Flat out. He just is. So, process-wise, didn't love that. He was +5 those minutes. I don't really think that's indicative of much, but I would like to see Mo more. Hopefully he is healthy, and we'll see how that looks again on Saturday. Keaton Wallace, 12 minutes, 6 points, 2 assists. Actually hit back-to-back threes in the third quarter when everybody else was making shots as well. Missed 2 free throws, which is kind of strange, but I thought Keaton individually was not a disaster tonight. He was fine. The lineup thing is not his fault. I think he's still playing too much, but I thought Keaton was okay individually. V. Krejci played a lot in this game. I think probably too much. He played 30 minutes and took 3 shots, which is kind of odd, especially because Veet has had the quick trigger this year. He's been bombing away, which is a good thing for Veet, I will say. But Luke Kennard played half as many minutes, 16, and took 4 more shots. And Luke is usually the one that's not the guy who lets it fly. I would have liked to see Luke play more than Veet. I think Luke is a better player than Veet overall. And unless Veet is lighting it up, which he was not doing in this game, I would have preferred Kennard. Maybe they're rewarding Veet for his play recently, which has been good for the most part. Those guys were both fine. I mean, Veet had kind of a quiet night. I think defensively, Veet was pretty rough, like most guys were in this game. Got to shoot more if he's going to play, but that's fine. Kennard offensively was pretty good. 10 points in 16 minutes, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. He did compete defensively, had 2 steals. He still has moments of breakdown for sure, just physically for Luke. But I thought he was one of their better guys as far as like compared to their normal baseline. His baseline is lower, to be fair, but I thought compared to his baseline, he wasn't bad defensively. Okongwu, 15 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists for Onyeka. A game worst minus 19. That's not really his fault, I don't think, based on what I saw on film. He took 5 threes, made 3 of them, 3 of 6 on twos. He's bombing away still from 3-point range. That's a huge development. Like, obviously, knock on wood, but he's been 40+% on real volume. That's a huge, huge step forward for Onyeka. Defensively, not his best work, I will say, but he wasn't like a total mess, I didn't think. To the starters, Zachary Richer, 2 points on 10 shots. He was 1 of 5 on twos, 0 of 5 on threes, 2 rebounds, and an assist for Zach in 21 minutes. They played him less than I would have thought, but because I think it was because he wasn't playing very well. It's kind of funny. Zach was +2 in the game, the best plus minus of anybody who played more than 4 minutes, which is funny. The way I said it in real time was that Zach was playing like someone who had almost broken their back on Sunday and then probably not played a lot of basketball between now and then. I think he was rusty. He looked a little bit, not kind of uneven on his feet. That's all fine. This happened earlier this season, by the way, where Richer had the minor injury. He came back, and the first game or 2 after the injury, he was kind of out of sorts, and then he found it, and he was totally fine. In fact, in the 9 previous games before he actually had the back injury, or I guess hip injury, 4 days ago, in the previous 9 games, he had 14 points per game on like 60% true shooting and was like playing well on the whole. Tonight was bad, but I think it was probably just rust, and I wouldn't worry too much about it. At least he gave them good effort, and I think probably defended better than most guys did in this game. Dyson Daniels, interesting game for Dyson. So 31 minutes, 8 points on 8 shots, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 5 turnovers. It was not a good Dyson game offensively. Like, the 5 turnovers is too many. He didn't do much until the fourth quarter as far as like being aggressive. He was not aggressive enough. He still isn't shooting enough. It's been a topic now for a while. I also think that he, like, after the game, and maybe even during the game, I was seeing like a lot of negativity about Dyson. And like, I get it, but I also don't. Like, he was not the problem in this game. Like, offensively, the Hawks offense was not the problem at all. Defensively, he was their best defender. Created some havoc, did what he usually does. 5 turnovers is too many. Like, he didn't play well offensively, full stop. But I saw a lot of takes as well, like, the Hawks can't build an offense with Dyson on the court. That's just not been true this season. The Hawks coming in tonight had a 120 offensive rating with Dyson on the court. Like, it's early in the season. I don't want to overstate that sample, but like, he's not stopped them from doing anything offensively. I think he's got to be more aggressive. I mentioned early in the season they were working on his hand. Maybe that's still bothering him. He's got to shoot more, full stop. But I was kind of confused. He was not the problem in this game by any stretch, even if he definitely was not the huge solution on offense in a weird process game. Porzingis came back. He was also rusty, I thought, defensively in particular, but offensively he made shots. 16 points on 10 shots for Porzingis, 5 rebounds, had an assist. Had I think 3 or 4 times the Hawks ran plays for him to get like isolated on a smaller defender. He just shoots. I mean, he's just really excellent shooting over small defenders because he's 7'3" and has a high release and all that. It's a good weapon to have. Defensively, he was part of the problem. Like, clearly a step slow. I think all year he has not been what they thought he was. Maybe not thought, but they hoped he was going to be defensively. there's some time for that. Obviously, it's good that he played. The knee soreness, it was lingering there. I would be shocked if he played both ends of the back-to-back this weekend, but at least he was back on the court, even if the defensive side of the floor was a bit of an adventure for Kristaps. Jalen Johnson had a game that's like going to be hard to talk about with any level of nuance, but here we are. 26 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists. Obviously, that is very good. Like, that's big time box score numbers. His offensive game recently has been excellent. He's been putting up, historic kind of numbers in recent days. So there's that. I think on offense, he was everything that you would think with those numbers. Couple mistakes, turnovers, etc., but like he played well on offense. I thought Jalen was like really bad defensively. Like, again, I like to give you the full picture of like trying to grade guys against their own curve. So, for instance, I don't expect Luke Kennard or Trae Young, for example, to be the same defender as Jalen Johnson. So I'm grading on a curve on purpose because you can only be what you're allowed to be, like player-wise. But yes, Jalen's baseline's higher. He was really, really bad. I thought it was bad in real time, and I watched the film, and it was maybe worse. The fourth quarter was maybe even the worst part of it, even though the Hawks were kind of in comeback mode. So I will say early in the season, I pointed this out too. I thought Jalen had a rough start to the year defensively, like kind of strangely. And then he had improved. I think he kind of figured it out. He started to rebound more, get more engaged. I don't know if he was tired. He probably was because everybody was. This is a tough schedule spot. But I am confident that Quinn and company on the staff will be showing Jalen his defensive film and be like, Jalen, you got to be better than this. It was rough. And, I get it. By the way, I will always say this. The number one option on offense, you have to expect some downturn on defense. Like, if you just in a vacuum said, all right, on this night, whether they had Trey or whatever, Jalen's like the number 3 on offense. He'll probably defend better. You just have more energy for defense when you're not doing as much on offense. So that's part of this. That's a familiar tale with guys who are really good defenders early in their career. They become offensive players. They have bigger workloads and their defense slips. That's a very familiar story. It happens a lot. Like it's happened to Hawks in recent years. But he's got to be better than he was tonight for sure. Not the only guy that was a problem by any means, but I thought it was pretty actively bad, which was frustrating, I'm sure, on film. And the last guy that I will point out on purpose, like to do him last, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker was awesome in this game. 38 points, a career high for Nickeil. 8 threes, a career high as well in that category. He was 5 of 7 on twos, 8 of 10 on threes. He was kind of due for some positive regression 3-point wise coming into the night. Nickeil has been like a revelation getting to the rim in surprising ways. Like he was not really billed to be that. He's not averaged even 10 points a game for like 4 years. And now he's averaging like 19.5 points a game after tonight for the season. But it all happened regression-wise offensively. Defensively, he was fine. Had 3 block shots actually, which is interesting for his from his guard spot. But he was the clear brightest spot for the Hawks in this game. And unfortunate for him that he wasn't able to win this one because he definitely played enough and played well enough to win this game. That's all I have on the player-by-player stuff. Obviously, a frustrating night at the office. One more time, like this is not exactly like losing to Brooklyn or Indiana. Like I know I saw some people talking about that. Like this is not that. The Spurs are better than that. It's a road game. Nothing's assured in the NBA on the road. And one more time, the Hawks were coin flip in this game. But I say all that to say it was bad defensively, like full stop bad, and they got to be better than this, even on Saturday. So the last thing I'll say before we get out of here, the Hawks visit the New Orleans Pelicans on Saturday. We are following the Pelicans on this podcast for obvious reasons, because the Hawks own the Pelicans or the Bucks, first round pick unprotected. The Pelicans are 2-13 as I'm recording this podcast. Now it is a road game. The Pelicans do have NBA players. I think their talent is better than 2-13, to be honest with you, in particular when Zion plays, and he did play the other day. But it's also a good spot for the Hawks. While tonight was a bad spot for the Hawks, and they'll probably still be tired, the Pelicans play on Friday night in Dallas and then come back to play at home on Saturday against the Hawks. So the Hawks will have an advantage there. They're the better team. They have, I don't know if the Hawks players care, but the front office does, and maybe the staff does. It's not like a double win if they beat the Pelicans, but it's like a 1.2 win. It matters more because they also give the Pelicans a loss. So that'll be Saturday night in New Orleans. And then the Hawks have a back-to-back on Sunday at home against Charlotte. And Charlotte's not playing well either. Charlotte is 4-11. There was a report today that LaMelo Ball might be open to a trade. It's kind of a mess there too. So two things can be true at the same time. The Hawks have a very friendly opponent back-to-back on Saturday and Sunday. The Pelicans and Hornets are not very good. But it's still a back-to-back. The first game's on the road. And then the second one is probably the easier one as far as being at home, but it's also a back-to-back. So nothing guaranteed whatsoever. You want to sweep that? You definitely want to sweep it for sure. Like, you're better than these teams. But it'd be nice to erase some of the ugliness from this performance. But hold on tight, and we'll have full coverage of that game. Both games on Saturday and Sunday on this podcast. So please stay tuned for that as we begin Thanksgiving week. Also, you made it to the end of this podcast. I had a 2-part episode yesterday with my good friend Brian Schroeder about the NBA draft. There's lots of Pelican stuff in there, but top 5 picks, plenty to talk about on that, and that's still very relevant right now in the same podcast feed. So it's going to be it's actually the 6th show of the week in this feed. So we're loading up in advance of Thanksgiving, but please subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow me on Blue Sky if you want to at BT Rowland. And then also my non-podcast coverage of the Hawks can all be found at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Everybody, enjoy your Friday, and we'll see you after the game on Saturday night.